Larry has a treat for you.
Sitting is the new cigarette. Please stand up. Just reach up like you're reaching for apples on the street. So we have a rule in our yoga therapy RX that we don't sit for longer now and get things on the mat. And that's all it takes. Thank you very much. Give yourself a hand.
Our next speaker is the glue that holds so many of us together. LA Yoga stands as a beacon for so many when it comes out every month. And Felicia, a registered nurse, longtime board member of the Ayurveda Association here in the United States, has also been a pioneer within so much. The Yoga Glow website, our yoga therapy programs, and we've now originated a 100-hour program that she and Shiva anchor in Ayurveda for Self-Care. Welcome, Felicia.
I would just like to take a moment and thank everyone here, to Chris and Larry and Sarah and Narinjan and the entire team at LMU who put this on, as well as the Doshi family for their continued support of these teachings. And I'd like to thank all of you for spending your time on a Friday and a Saturday here in this room. And as we have seen, there is so much about community that is important for our health and well-being. I sort of feel like everyone who has spoken before me, and I am honored to be in this room with so many of my dear friends and colleagues and teachers and people who do amazing work in this field. I feel like so many people have kind of primed the pump for what I plan to talk about, which is just a little bit on the immune system and the integration of the immune system with all of this, as well as the importance of self-care when it comes to the practices of Ayurveda. And as Chris mentioned, Dr. Siva Mohan and I co-teach a course here at LMU that's part of the yoga studies and part of the Yoga Therapy RX program that is on Ayurveda and self-care. Because we can have all of the knowledge in the world, but if we do not practice that knowledge, then it does us no good. So I purposely picked sort of a backdrop or a background that has an image of nature and of the natural world. Because what I've thought a lot about is that we have such a rich tradition of teaching, such a rich textual tradition, such a rich tradition of people passing on teachings from teacher to student in various lineages. But when it comes down to it, Ayurveda is really a system of relationships. What is the relationship that we have within ourselves, our own body, mind, heart, and spirit? What are the relationships that we have with each other? And what are the relationships that we have with the environment around us? So in many ways, Ayurveda really is a science of these relationships. And it's so powerful, all of the teachings that it brings. And in many ways, our immune system, which is described in Ayurveda often, and one of my favorite descriptions of it, is that it is the intelligence of the body. And it is the intelligence of the body in terms of managing relationships. Because if you think for a moment about what the immune system does, the immune system determines what is you from what is not you, what is supposed to be sitting in this chair in this moment, and what is not supposed to be. And if we think about that for a moment, what is actually you, or what we think of as you, right, or what we think of as ourselves, is really an entire ecosystem, some of which are cells that actually belong to us, and many of which are cells that are really not us, but that are members of our microbiome, that are the various ecosystem of different microbes that live on our skin. And that is the subject of a talk later today. But I think it is an important reminder of this sense that even, everything about our health and wellness and well-being comes down to this sense of our ecosystem and our relationships. So in Ayurveda, there is a great deal of importance placed on self-care, and many of the talks yesterday touched on this a bit, and touched on ideas that relate to the cycles that we live in. And there's much in the Ayurvedic texts, and there's much in teaching, and there's much in various courses that are taught here and other places that talk about the importance of dinacharya, that idea of how we organize our life in terms of the cycles of the day and throughout every part of our life in lifestyle medicine, that many of the daily practices that are described in Ayurvedic teachings, part of what they do is to help strengthen the immune system, even if are not directly described that way. They may be described in terms of their effects on the doshas and so on. There are many of the traditional teachings. Now, what's interesting is that, when we think about many of the things that are involved in our daily lives today, and I know I am somebody who doesn't leave the house without a few electronic devices that seem to be always on, I couldn't really find anything that talked about how cell phone usage strengthens the immune system. And in fact, as Lori mentioned in her talk, that our cell phone usage may mean that we need yoga therapy even more today than, say, at the time that the Ayurvedic texts were written. That if we are in an ecosystem and if we are living a life in relationship with the world around us, that the demands of the world that we live in have an effect on our own bodies. So we know, and there's a great deal of research, and one of the things that I think is exciting about the world that we live in, right, is that there is this sense of synergy between what we know in the teachings of Ayurveda and yoga and then what we are observing through modern scientific research, which really modern scientific research is just a systematic way of organizing our observations. And in terms of the Ayurvedic teachings, they are also an organized way of recording observations. So as I mentioned, the immune system in Ayurveda, just overall, my favorite way of looking at it is as the intelligence of the body. There is a relationship in Ayurveda that is very well described between prana, tejas, and ojas. And those are words that we heard yesterday, and they're words that really are repeated throughout the Ayurvedic texts. And they're words that in Sanskrit don't have exact translations into English. Ojas, which, is our essence, is often described as our vitality. It's the governing energy and substance of our immune system. Now, so our essence is what strengthens us, and if our immune system is the intelligence of the body, how we take care of our ojas, how we utilize the practices of self-care and the practices of our daily routine throughout our cycles is important for our core vitality, our core strength, and helps to really allow the immune system to do its primary role, which is the governing not only of what is you and what is not you, but it is the caretaker of this ecosystem. We can also think about our consciousness being the caretaker of the ecosystem of our mind, body, heart, and spirit. Right? There's a sense of this, how we are the caretaker, how our consciousness is the caretaker. And yesterday people talked too about the relationship between, our vital essence, what we need to hold on to, what strengthens us, what is actually belongs to us, and then various waste products, which in Sanskrit are called ama, sometimes they're referred to as toxins, metabolic waste, the things that are not us, the things that we need to release. And part of enhancing the intelligence of the body and the functioning of the immune system is releasing what needs to be released and taking care of ourselves. So I've mentioned this a bit, and again, the sense of how we are an ecosystem. And when we think about our health and our wellness this way, when we think about the intelligence of the body, when we think about how we take care of our immunity, we can think about this as an ecosystem. And this, I think, not only occurs on a physical level, but also, as everyone has mentioned so far, on a spiritual and a psychosocial and mental and emotional level. So I've mentioned this, the sense of the ecosystem management that relates to our health and wellness and even our sense of self. So our relationship with the environment and the immune system. So we're constantly, as I mentioned, interacting in the ecosystem in which we live. And there's a lot of research that talks about things like how going out in nature and our relationship with nature, how even putting our hands in the soil, the microbiome of the soil, affects our own health and our immunity. So I want to bring us back to the sense of the self-care practices in Ayurveda and the importance of them in terms of our daily relationship. Because if you also think about an ecosystem, and if this is the framework for how we understand our health and wellness, this is something that's dynamic. It's not static. We are breathing 10 to 20 times a minute, and every breath has an effect on our health and well-being. Our bodies, even when we are sitting here, and Larry had us stand up for a moment, which I'm going to have us do again, because our bodies exist in movement. And there are systems within the body that help to support our immunity, our health and wellness. And one that I like to think about a lot is our lymphatic system, which is part of our body's trash collection system, part of our body's digestive system, part of our body's immune system. And one of the things our lymphatic system does is collects debris, collects material, collects interstitial fluid from around the cells of the body to return that material back to general circulation. So when we sit, one of the dangers of sitting for a long time is that we may experience some stagnation. So let's all stand up again. And then just go ahead and take your hands up in the air and start to rotate your hands, your fingers, your wrists in circles. This is also a little bit of cross-training for text messaging. And then roll in the other direction. It's also important to help stimulate the circulation of the lymphatic system. And then go ahead and shake your hands out. And then we hear sometimes about lymph nodes, which are one of the parts of the lymphatic system. And we have hundreds of lymph nodes in our body. And then go ahead and I'll mirror you. So take your left hand up in the air. One of the things about teaching yoga for a long time is you sort of forget where your own left and right is. And go ahead and take your right hand just kind of on your hip or somewhere and reach up and then just lean over to the side. So we have a lot of those hundreds of lymph nodes underneath our armpit, down the sides of our chest, down even into the sides of our waist. And let's go ahead and switch. Inhale, come up, and then switch sides and just do this little bit of a side stretch. And this just helps to encourage this sense of circulation through the lymph nodes in the sides of the body. And then go ahead and inhale, come up. Exhale, release. And then if you can, take your hands behind your back, interlace your fingers, and just stretch the hands back. Feel the stretch around the front of the chest. So we also have to remember that doing self-care practices are not necessarily just limited to a couple of minutes in the morning when we may do things like Abhyanga or Nasya or Neti Pot, and then go ahead and release and let's roll the shoulders a few times in circles. But we can also think about how self-care and this caretaking of our ecosystem is a practice that we do throughout the day, and then other direction, throughout all 24 hours of the day. Right? It's not like, okay, here's my self-care time, and I'm going to check that off in a box, and then I'm going to go through the rest of my day. And then go ahead and shake both hands out again. And then we'll take both hands and just tap right around the center of the chest. So beneath the bone here, the sternum, is our thymus, and our thymus is made out of lymphatic tissue. It's part of the lymphatic system. And let's go side to side a little bit. And this also might wake you up a little bit. It's not quite as good as a cup of coffee or strong black tea, but it still provides that little bit of stimulation. And then go ahead and release. How do you all feel? A little bit better, right? Okay. And you can go ahead and sit down again, but I'd like you, when you sit down, to just take one ankle and rotate your ankle in circles. So another place that we have a concentration of lymph nodes in our body is around our ankles, behind our knees, and our inner groin. And so another thing that happens when we sit for a long time, we're not necessarily encouraging the circulation here, and then go in the other direction. So just rotate your ankle in circles. And you can do this with shoes on. You don't have to have any fancy equipment, and you can shake out your foot. And let's do the other side. You can do this on an airplane, you can do this at work, and just roll the ankle in circles. So again, the sense of encouraging lymphatic circulation, which then encourages the intelligence of the immune system, and then go in the other direction, which then helps us to take care of the ecosystem of our own bodies, the strengthening of the immune system. So we also know that there is a lot of research, I'm just checking time, a lot of research on, the effects of, the various practices that are related to Ayurveda in terms of our immune system. Practices like Abhyanga, which is the traditional oil massage. Practices like the use of the breath. Practices like meditation and mindfulness, going out in nature, all of these things I mentioned. We've talked a lot, and we will continue to do so this weekend about some of the details of those ideas and concepts. But I just wanted to give us that sense of the big picture and connecting. The breath itself helps us to actually strengthen the immune system because of the relationships between the breath and the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, the stress response, and the immune system. So let's just all take a moment and pay attention to your breath. And see if you can, in these next few breaths, feel the exhalation become just a little bit longer. That's one of the practices that helps us to tap into the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system, or the body's relaxation response. Lengthening our exhalation has also been shown to do things like slow our heart rate. So again, I just want to encourage you, you don't have to do self-care as an additional task throughout the day, but just embedded throughout the day. Even pausing for a moment to breathe, pausing for a moment to incorporate some movement, even amidst stillness. I think that is the end of my very exciting slideshow. But one of the things I just wanted to also mention is that, as I said, there is a course here on Ayurveda and Self-Care that goes into great depth of these practices. We will continue to talk about this throughout the day. But I do just remind you or encourage you to think about this sense of what is it that we are doing moment by moment to think about the ecosystem of our own bodies, how we are interacting within ourselves, body, mind, heart, and spirit, how we are interacting with each other. And what a great gift do we have, even in this space right now, to be in a room of people who are pursuing these ideals, either through study or through their life work. Even this creates a sense of really strengthening our own immune system to be in this field, right? Or strengthening our own sense of wellness, to be in a place of connectivity rather than disconnection. And how can we do that throughout our lives? So I encourage you, even after you leave this room, to maintain that sense of connection, embodiment, and taking care of the relationships in your own body, mind, heart, and spirit with each other and with the planet that we live on. Thank you.